rid of that. All right, on to full screen. There we go. So the 3 months trip to get us to Slovenia, we flew into Nice, which is our little red dot there, traveled through northern Italy. We're going to be doing another presentation probably later on, I believe. We had actually originally scheduled that one when I got a call and says, we need help. Nobody showed up. So I jumped in, and so we did the middle of our trip, which is Slovenia up in the corner. After Slovenia, we left and drove to the northern French Alps and then down to Marseille and sent home. But that's another whole story. This is what it looked like when we were actually driving. We leased a car and car camp along the way, and there was a lot of tunnel construction or bridge construction wherever you go through there. Triglav National Park is the main national park in Slovenia. That traced it out in red there, and the dot to the left is the national park, or sort of the end of the chain of the Julian Alps. The other dot is Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia, which we also did at some time there, which I'll show you tonight. There's the park. Some of those, all those little squigglies are there, are hikes that I had planned and we either did or didn't do, and depending on the weather and other things going on. So essentially, the park boundary is this here, this brown area. We've concentrated up here where this green line is. We were on that side of the park the whole time, 12 days. We did not go to the other side of the park. This was sort of a test. I'm sure we'll go back there and try to do the southern part. It's quite large. Triglav is the national symbol and the highest mountain. It's 9,500 feet at the center of the park. So we left Venice, was our last stop there in an evening, drove past a numerous, you have to watch out for these little orange boxes. They don't have policemen, they have photo takes, and if you go over the speed limit at all, you get a ticket in the mail. Not a good thing. Numerous tunnels. These are some of the ones that tended to be busy. Ski resorts as we get up into the mountains. Old border crossing, typical of a lot of the European, to Camp Spik. This was our campground we plotted down in for 12 days. Actually, we got called the Americans who didn't leave because we came in and said, we'll stay for 6 days, wound up 12. We loved it so much. Those buildings all there behind you, a lot of people ask me about camping. Those are all the shower rooms, the cleanup rooms, the laundry rooms. And this is sort of a typical campground there. There's us right here. Where's my little pointer? There's Lynn doing some setup here with our tent that we bought over there, a table, and some of our gear that we take over. A nice green grass area. And just to give you a little, here's a typical washroom. We were inspecting and saying, oh, okay, it's for your laundry. In the back, you got your dishwashing facilities, and that's our view. So, and we usually try to find places that have pretty good views. The thing I wanted to sort of talk about, though, is it's not just about the rocks and the trees and the trails, but it's also about the people, the culture, and the camping that we do. And one of the things, not only is it a low cost, I mean, 25 to maybe 30 euros a night to camp, but you have all these people you run into. We interact with everybody around us mostly. One guy came over, I was pounding a steak in with a rock, and one guy came over with a hammer, another there, can we help you here? You can help you set up. And everybody speaks English, so language is not a problem, especially in Slovenia. They're very good with English, and even in the smallest villages. So that was definitely not a problem. Our experiences, consequently, with our interaction, we meet people and they tell us about things that we would never know about, the little gems and the niches. And so we don't really have a set itinerary. We sort of plan some things, but that changes. And two of our itinerary, we have 2 bike rides and I have 4 hikes here. The bike rides were totally impromptu. I had no idea there was a rail to trail here when we came here. And there was a wonderful falls that we can hike to right out of the campground. I found out from the campground host, another great source if you're traveling. They know a lot of the regional things here. This that's a good question. We're near course, the main, it's kind of a very tiny village, but the main village, which is a ski town, is called, let me get this right here, Kretska Gora. Some other people have been there from the AMC on a couple of HF tours, and Kretska Gora is just down the road a little bit. And that's where we go to get for shopping, and where we rented our bicycles for this trip. So the first, that, yeah, there were no trains in this valley. So Triglav National Park. I've been along. That's it. So Triglav National Park is to the south of us there. It's a long valley which has a lot of ancient travelers from way past, a lot of big trade route. Austria is just to the north, that a little gray line you see here. So we got Austria and Italy right here. So this particular day we decided to bike into Italy, and I had discovered through Gaia Maps there were two wonderful little lakes up at the tail end of that little dog leg there that looked really nice to go to. This are the Lago Frugini Inferior and Superior. Now the inferior means small, it doesn't mean it's lesser lake. So the lake to the north is actually a glacial formed lake. The other one is a man-made lake that just to the south of it there. This is Kretska Gora, where we rented the bikes in the main part of town. And I put this in here because it's a memorial to Russian soldiers in World War I who built the mountain pass roads, and many of them died doing it to get over because they had to for the war. And I've included in here a number of different issues because war is one of those things you see quite often in Europe everywhere you go. One of the wars, especially here, you had the Bosnian wars, you know, World War I, World War II, and it just, there are remnants all over of buildings and memorials to the peoples and the struggles of the region. A little more. So that's the bike path there. It goes right through the center of town. We're actually going west out of town. That's the next one we do later on. So, you know, you're instantly into some wonderful scenery of the mountains, the farms that are along here. This was a weekday, so it's pretty quiet. Here's our border, Slovenia one side, Italy, Italia. Moving to the next. Some wonderful lupins and alternate uses here, of course. You got biking, hiking, a lot of skier types that practice there. So we get to the lake, we lock our bikes up here, and so now we have to go for a little bit of a hike because it's not that easy to get to the next lake by bike. So this is some of the glacial scree on the south side of the lake that we went to, the glacier lake, right at the foothills. There's a duck down there in the bottom. And this was our lunch spot. Not bad, you know, for, you know, a pittance of a day, $1 million view. Some families that come up there. A lot of families. You know, Europe is big on family outdoors and having some fun on the oversized bench. This is the there's a little restaurant there at the lake. And they're always so good about making everything look great. And they also are really big on channeling energy. Every stream just about, this is a little hydroelectric dam that powers the village below, that they channel that water and bring it in and run it back out. Some wonderful little farms, some locals snoozing in the shade for a little bit as we go by. And these little structures that were just out there, meticulous gardens. Everybody has a little vegetable garden of some kind. Back through Slovenia. Also, this was one of the dog lakes that goes to an Olympic ski resort that has trained some of the best athletes in the world here. If you look off here to the far, this is the actual real slope that starts way up here. These are all training slopes. And if you want an idea of the scale, these are men right here. They're doing some maintenance. They're blowing leaves off of it's some type of artificial surface. The middle part here is getting reconstructed. There's guys with the 2x4s and hammers and everything else redoing that whole thing there. It was quite interesting, little resort and training center. And you're probably wondering what these racks are for, and you'll see that in a minute. But a lot of these little villages you're passing through, old barns. And we were there for hay season. We didn't know. It had been beautiful days. So this is little tractor goes and pushes everything and flips it over so it dries and makes a little pile of it. But for the most part, the machinery is sort of secondary. Most of it's all done by hand. It's these big rakes here. You see the big orange rake here to the side. They throw them into these bins, and everybody gets out. Grandpa and grandma were there. The young daughter, I believe, somebody in the family, and he's no slouch. It's a pretty good sized bunch of hay he's hauling there. This is what the racks are for. They stack each one of these bundles up on the rack to dry. And the man up in the rack has a little chair that he can keep moving up and up on like a ladder as it gets put up there, which is the traditional way. All these villages, even though they're recreation centers and tourist centers, also are working farms and working villages. There's dairy, there's sheep. These are a little more advanced. They're doing very big size. But even the smallest, this person has his yard. He has a machine that looks like a lawnmower, like a big scissors, and he's cutting all the hay there that he's going to dry just from his own little backyard. The other thing I found very unique is every barn has its little signature cut out in it. They're beautiful little, like I was the one who built this, or this is my symbol. I'm not exactly sure. Snoozing there. And I always are heading back to the Ljubljana through town. This can get very busy here, by the way. And of course, this right here, this little ice cream stand was our target at the end of the hike. Some little refreshment before we turn our bikes in for the day. And then back home for our little rest. And this day, this is the right one. Hang on a second. Oh, they are out of order. Okay, that's all right. I can do this one next. They're a little out of order, but this one was actually one of the premier hikes we did. I'd seen it online. It had some nice elevation to it. The only trick was driving up on a dozen different switchbacks to get to this mountain pass, the Sarik mountain pass. And we started from this hut here. They have huts all through the mountains here, some of which are right out, pretty accessible, and usually at the beginning of a trail or at the end. Most of our elevation gain was in this. It was probably about a 2,000 foot elevation gain total, about 6 miles we did. But some really beautiful scenery, as you'll see here. That was our parking lot. With the hut is up there, you can get some refreshment. So we're heading up here to this pass at the edge of this peak. That's looking back down into the valley where we just driven. And there we are at the pass. Yes. Can they hear me online pretty good, Bill? Okay, great. So there were two choices. We either take this scree trail that's right at the base of this peak, or we can take a more wooded approach. And again, families up here, they just climbed probably 800 to 1,000 feet to get here with their kids. All kids play with hiking poles. Like it's just second nature for them with their low alpine shoes on. And they haul them up in the little carriers and then they'll go hiking. It was fairly flat up here at this point. The signage is pretty good. We're doing this Spika, this Slanova Spika, which I believe translates into being a high ridge. Spika being a ridge. 45 minutes away is actually not a serious estimate unless you're moving fast and don't stop and look. But and most European signs don't give you mileage, they talk about distance, because depending on the rough terrain, the time to get from A to B might be much longer than if you're going up a steep slope than if you're going on a flat, even though it's the same, might be 5 miles, but obviously the steep slope is going to take, you're going to go a mile an hour. On the flat, you might go 2.5, 3 miles an hour. So they gauged it by time. Still some snow there. This is mid to late June, sorry, that we were hiking there. Some nice alpine flowers coming out. Starting to look down into the valley. A little lunch spot here. And off in the distance, we're just starting to see the valley. We're looking towards the valley where we had bicycled. We probably bicycled right along that section there. Yeah, I got a little bumblebee butt here in this one. And the azaleas were big there this time of year. They were growing everywhere they could, even in places you didn't think they could grow. This was probably the most treacherous spot. We had to kind of inch our way around these pointy rocks. And this, I know it doesn't give you perspective, but the edge of that grass drops off straight down into this gully. And if you were slipped here, you were gone. You were down into that gully, and that was some more signage. So now we have a much better look at, these are the ski slopes that we had gone to. And this is the town where they were doing some of the hang-in and the bike trail. This peak is in Austria. This ridge is the Slovenian border right there. A little obvious sign, the Spika. The clouds were phenomenal this day. I'm going to show you several. They were ebbing and flowing over these peaks continuously. Now here we're looking back. This is the pass we came up into. Here you can just see a faint line of the trail that if you had taken the scree trail. And I did see people over. They were slogging through the snow drift here at the base, and it comes out over here and would met with us at the further end. And that's Mount Spik. Mount Spik is an 8,000-foot peak. That's what our campsite's named after. You can see it from the campground, depending on where you are. And this guy was the one we watched a lot because it was just a really nice cloud show of ebbing. One last climb. Beautiful larch trees here through this whole area, very delicate. And then as we got to the top, the whole thing was covered with these little blue forget-me-nots, or I'm not sure what they are. They just were, it was sort of like the poppies were in Wizard of Oz. We were walking through these fields of forget-me-nots. He finally peeks out. And so we reached the peak. There was a metal box area you could sign in. And nobody from the US was there. We try to go where tourists don't typically. There's some more of those. You can see around the base, some more of those forget-me-nots everywhere. And this steep valley here, just beautiful view. Here is looking back in the other direction. It's stunning. Mount Spik way off in there in the distance. So we would sit around for a while. There's Mount Spik again, a little more up close. So now we're heading back down the slopes. Some interesting trees. That drops off right away, by the way. If you went to the other side of that tree, it was pretty much straight down into the valley. And this guy was bothering us. I shouldn't say bothering us. He was just wondering what we were eating and could I have some? The new larch cones. forming there, these little red tufts. And I took this because of the scale. These two trees are probably 2 feet at least in diameter. And yet off here in the distance on this, just hanging on a thread, are trees of similar scale. You always had to keep reminding yourself how big everything was, because you just lose it, like looking down into the Grand Canyon. That again, that is Austria off in the distance. These were moons, what are they called? Blue moon worts or snowdrops that were coming up all through the out of the field here. They're in all different postures. They're just beautiful little delicate pieces of flowers. Wonderful alpine flowers. And so now we're back at our the high pass where we have to descend down to where our car is down here. And this is the main mountain pass that I was talking about. The Russians had built, the Russian prisoners. And over as you go and start down the other side, it's called the Soka Valley, which I have some slides of. And it supposedly, it was, everyone said, you got to go to the Soka Valley, you got to go to the Soka Valley. So we did eventually. It's a beautiful little river there, a little more remote. Little flowers, some little lawnmowers. This is not an AI production or Photoshop. This is a face actually in the rock, and they have a plaque about it, and it's been there for eons, and it's called the Pagan Girl. She would help travelers in the winter find their way, I guess, because they could recognize it. And somewhere along this it's a long story, but she got turned into stone and was forevermore on the mountain now. So some of that folklore that we weave in there. Little sample of that. We kind of cheated a bit and got onto the road and did the switchback. It was just too gravelly, you know, the scree. It's not fun to fall on. Again, some of the war remnants. This was a cannon emplacement focusing on the Soka Valley that is now a sheep barn. At least it gets used for something good, I think, now, you know. Ljubljana. The J's are like a vowel. They're an E sound. So it's Ljubljana. We had 3 points of interest. This is the center of town where there's a set of 3 bridges that are pretty famous in Slovenia. A very interesting library here built by a famous architect that's Slovenian, and the art museum. And then we kind of did a, oh, I forgot to put a point. This is there's a castle involved, of course. Europe, it's got to be a castle, right? So we emerged out of an underground parking lot here and see this concert thing set up here and wondering what's going on. Oh, what happened? A rehearsal they're having. They're going to broadcast this around their nation. The president of Ljubljana, of Slovenia, is here somewhere. I don't know if she's in this group to do some presentation. We watched this for several rounds, full orchestra. They have dancers in the background. It was going to be quite the production for their Independence Day. We just sort of stumbled. It was 2 days after when we got there. This is the river that flows through town. And here's our resident castle up here. Some beautiful, nice colors. And that green is not an algae. It's a lot of the rivers get this alpine dust, glacial dust, that depending on the minerals in that water reflect the light difference. Sometimes it's a aqua blue. This would happen to be green. But it's kind of lively along the river here, obviously. And we're coming up to the what they call the three bridges. Pleknik, Jose Pleknik is their Frank Lloyd Wright. He was a master architect of the area and designed. They were having troubles in the middle of the city, so he built three bridges, one of which was for transportation, and the other two are for pedestrians. Very elegant bridges. Better seen actually from the air, which I don't have a shot of, but it's the big center where everybody comes to hang out, and all kinds of things happening now here in the center of town, events. And we just happened to come on the one food fair of the week that they have, which was really fantastic. I mean, some of the goodies here. These are all vegan, by the way. And my wife and I are mostly vegan, vegetarian too, but all of these are different flavors of chicky. You know, you got your plant-based chicken and plant-based beef, and these are probably not vegan. There's probably butter in them. We bought one anyhow. This is one of their typical traditional little custard cakes here. But as you can see, everybody's down here. This is a Friday afternoon. You can get water at the spigot there, and everybody's sitting around. And veganism is quite. There were like 4 different booths out here. Got music playing. Everybody getting in line to Slovenians, and a nice reuse of crates. For the city, they didn't put out fancy furniture. They're just old crates they've got constructed. There's some paella, shrimp paella, if you like that sort of thing. But there was also flower vendors and food. Peony are really popular there. I saw so many. These things are about the size of a softball. They're huge. The vegetable stands. Lots of old and new sculpture. Like, who's walking there now? Everybody's. So now we're heading back towards the library we wanted to go visit, looking at some of the architecture, you know, the very old here, very new off in the distance here. Old and new mix. Oh, this is a World War I memorial, and I like this in particular because it also featured, it was the only woman I saw. It had to be a nurse that was being memorialized and honored for her work in the war. Always had a view of the castle, and this is called the Iron Bridge. It's these dragons that have been turned into mascots, and all kinds of tchotchkes. You can get a little dragon that does just about everything: skateboards and flies and bikes and hikes. And now we're heading into a plaza here towards this library done by Mr. Pleknik. A little view of the fountain. And what makes this so unique, and especially for his time, is he was taking what he saw around all of the older buildings, and you'll see this in the castle, where whatever stone was available from whatever century was being built, that's what got used. You know, it might have been smooth stone, rough stone, brick, and when we get to the castle, you'll see the same sort of pattern and texture on the medieval buildings, and that he wanted to incorporate as part of. And yet the interior is very smooth and solemn and quiet. This is their main library. There's also a lot of, I want to say, post-Russian architecture, the sort of hardcore socialist art, you would call it, where they're supposedly honoring the people, the Communist Party, and the families, and another. This was a memorial to the resistance. Ljubljana was one of the only cities that was fortified and walled off with barbed wire and fencing, and they basically were trying to undo the Slovenian culture. They did everything to try to destroy Slovenian culture and make them either German or Italian. The Italians were here, and then the Nazis came in, and it was quite brutal. Things I read, very harsh. It was basically a concentration camp. A city turned into a concentration camp. You know, they were starving people and trying to brainwash them into thinking of not, you know, German culture. And these are hands and stuff reaching as part of the resistance for hope. The Romans were here. These were just open areas you could go in and look, and that's real. You could actually walk up and touch them. I didn't want to, but there were no guards. Roman sculptures in the city. And this was fascinating. That's the U.S. Embassy. And you note the rainbow flag they have on the embassy, right in proximity to the museum. And this is their museum, where we decided to have a little cafe Americano. Here they would serve you the espresso in the small cup, and then they give you a hot pot of water so you could dilute it to your taste. You know, Americanos drink it weak, you know. Europeans drink it pretty strong. I actually like it sometimes, but I like to be able to have a long sip. So we sat there and watched this little family and enjoyed the sculptures. And so they were having several exhibitions. This is one of what they call socialist art, which really dealt with their first forming of a government. Slovenia was part of Yugoslavia. Slovenia and Herzegovina and Bosnia were federations, much like we have states. They had federations within Yugoslavia. And after World War II, you know, the Russians kind of control everything. The president, this is a close-up of that banner you saw across the bottom about the, you know, the people's workers and revolution and building for their country. Of course, there was a lot of modern art there too. It's kind of whimsical, fun. Some of it, some very abstract, but quite interesting. We love art. I could have showed you reams and reams of art. We went to about a dozen different museums in our travel. Some bright composition, more modernist forms. But they also had an exhibition on resistance art, what they call resistance art, of people who fought for the resistance or were being encouraged to fight. Here's Mickey Mouse carrying some type of weapon, machine gun there. Image of struggle, pushing back. Slovenia partisan. The partisan was anybody who fought who fought in the resistance. Encouraging up there. And this was a poster memorializing, dedicating women who were not out fighting, but were supporting on the back end. You know, they were building things, they were doing typing, they're constructing, and for the men who were out fighting. So once we left there, we went down through their business district, quite open. I mean, cars drive through here, but there's no curbs, or everybody was sort of calm and relaxed with traffic. Bicycles are very big for transportation. So we're back to the food fair. We got one of those vegan burgers and a Buddha bowl of noodles and nuts and where people are really getting out on the streets and having some fun. It's Friday night. But we want to go see the castle, and there's a couple of pictures along the way. And it's a little bit of a hike up to the top. And you can just start to see some of the architecture I was talking about, some brick here, some different colored stones, different types of materials that's incorporated. Some very nice views of the city. clay tile roofs. You're looking off in towards the park where we're staying, the national park. But this you really can see, you know, the brick, the stone, some rough, some smooth, very smooth here, more machined. Come on. Now this castle was almost completely rebuilt. From neglect, it had crumbled, and it took some hits during the Second World War. This was all new, constructed from drawings and plans. You can see some of the modern glass that they put in there to make it more open and useful. And the architecture, unfortunately, it's a little blurry, but I just wanted to show the different modern architecture that does exist in the capital there, in the outskirts. And they actually had built a plaza down below. So where we were walking up above was supported by these steel beams, and much of the other walls and things had steel structures into this bedrock that was holding it up. So it will stay there for generations to come now. And it's obviously family oriented because it says, I'll stay in Ljubljana as long as that, longer than I planned, by Frederick the Castle Rat. In English, and they spoke very good English. I didn't know if I mentioned that, which is good because, I mean, I know a little bit of French and Italian, and some of their words are similar to our words, but Slovenian is like Russian. It's not much you can glean out of it. So we're back downtown now for the evening lights, and just sitting watching people. There were accordion players and other instrumentalists here. Castles lit up on the hilltop. And then as we leave, now they're into a full dress rehearsal on this. And one of the things we started realizing, you know, with this owl, and even though
smo del zapletenega ekosistema, kaskada v vodnjaku energije, ki se po nas pretaka kot voda.
Couldn't completely understand, we knew what they were talking about. Slovenia has so many natural resources like that, the animals, and they want to protect them. They're really big on protecting their parks, keeping you know, endangered species safe, and you know, that's part of their culture and their tourism. This hike here was circled in red. There is Triglav Mountain, the high peak, the 9,500-foot peak. But if you really wanted to hike it, you're talking about several days, because you cannot get there in one day. It's just way too much. But there's several huts all around here. You could hike to one of the huts in one day, and then hike up to the peak, and then, you know, back to your hut, and then maybe on the third day you come back down, or cross to many of the other. It was really intricate number of trails at the peaks there. You could go from peak to peak via the huts, much like a lot of places in Europe. So I wanted to be able to see it up close and personal. So we did this loop hike down along the base of Triglav and back again, probably about 1,700-foot elevation gain in this, with about 6 miles. Not a particularly difficult hike. At the beginning, there was these are called pink shrouds, I think, where we were parked. Triglav was up there, kind of in the clouds, not quite showing its head. The huts are very beautiful there. And I'm showing this because some of the language I got used to. Pot means trail, so it's the trail, Triglavski Brisci, the Briska Trail. And we are here, and we're going to do this loop up in here. But you can see all the other connecting trails and spider webs go from peak to peak. There were a number of memorials as we came across for fallen rock climbers. Rock climbing was very big here. That probably stood about 10 feet high. It was quite impressive. Starts out kind of low, then we have to start our ascent. Some beautiful woods. This was most of the elevation game again in the beginning. So a lot of the mountains here are pretty steep, so you really either have to drive to a pass or spend some time in the huts to get up in there. So now we're looking, there's Triglav. He poked his head out for a little while with all of his comrades. And we're going to go just loop up here to near a pass and then back down the other side, this green area. We're sprinkling a little bit. I think Lynn's got her poncho on there. You can see here in the wall that one of the trails that goes up to the huts kind of disappeared up here. I have a feeling it switched back somewhere and went back up into a ravine. The light was very flat that day. It was actually kind of interesting rather than bright sunlight because of the clouds. As a photographer, I sort of really enjoyed seeing the texture and the layers of all of the millions of years of sediment. A little chilly that day. I had my cap on. Pogat dom. A dome is a house, or it can also mean hut, house. And just the name of the hut is the first one. We're just going to make a stop at a little. It's a little alpine clubhouse, basically. This is an alpine clematis. They're very delicate and they don't get many flowers on them, but I'd say they're probably 2 inches long. One little erratic boulder sitting there, and it's probably higher than 2 stories, maybe. Now Triglav has gone missing here. He's up there in the clouds again. Some globe flowers and columbines, something we all recognize here. It's a little alpine hut. It's a private alpine club, which there are quite a few of them up here. But just a cute building using all the local findings of knotted wood. I think we should build one of these up at one of the huts, one of the lean-tos. It's a nice little wooden outhouse. Now we're heading down towards Vorata. Vorata, they give places names, and the Vorata is one of these plateaus. We'll see that name later as we go along. It's well known. Lily of the Valley. I particularly like this because my mom used to grow dozens of lily of the valley, so it brings back a lot of memories there. And we're basically following the red dot trail here. Off in the distance, you can see that trail that goes up to the hut. A lot of plants like this limestone. There are particular flowers that love dry limestone areas, and just growing out of all of this rocky surface is pretty amazing. Another little bit of scale. There's me in the trail. Some pretty good sized boulders you have to traverse here. One of those limestone washes. More beautiful azaleas. That's looking back where we came down from. I just like the way sometimes Mother Nature composes things, the boulders, the snow, the rocks. So we took a little break here. There's 2 very unique streams down below us here. But before I go down there, we saw these figures. These guys are all rock climbers. I could tell they all have helmets, or either carrying the helmets or wearing helmets, and ropes dangling off of their packs. They'd been up there. There's a couple of round caves I couldn't get a good shot of that they probably were in. So that what makes these 2 streams unique is one was very green and mossy and lush, almost something you'd see in Ireland, and then the other was just this yellow limestone, sort of raw, barren, coming from two different locations off of the mountain there. I don't know why. So we're back, and of course, Triglav starts to clear out as we leave. That's okay. It was a beautiful hike there anyhow. Quite often there'll be trees growing right on top of a boulder all throughout the forest. It's an interesting sight. So this gives you a little view of the topography. We were up in this area here in this glacial carved valley, basically. But you can see there's numerous places you can go. Blurry, but these skis, is a big thing there is skiing on glaciers. They'll pack these up on their backs up to the huts and then go find a glacier and go skiing for a couple of days. We got a real treat when we got back to the campground. The sunset here was just turning out to be this wonderful, what they call alpine glow. And, everybody was starting to come out from their campers like, oh my God, look at that. All kinds of comments. It just got better for like an hour. We had this wonderful, like I said, a great way to meet people when you're camping shoulder to shoulder and get out and talk about it. Oops, I just want to let that go backwards for a second. Yeah, that last one there where the clouds just started absorbing all of that glow. These were a couple of friends from Austria that we had made pretty good friends with. They were breaking down camp and needed to see them go. And we exchanged some addresses and we hope to get over there sometime. And we made friends with a number of people from the Netherlands and Germany, one couple from France. This was our second bike ride here. We're going to start again, go back to Krasnogora to rent our bikes. We're going to go, by the way, you were asking what, I can go to that. That's the name of the town where we were camping, Godza Marjurgek. And we're going to go down to Ljubljana. But our village was probably like only 3 or 4 houses, not much of a village at all. And the reason we're going down here, one of the reasons, not only is it a nice ride, but at the end of it, we bike up into the national park, and right here there is a slap, and a slap is a waterfall in Slovenia, and this was a 175-foot waterfall that we passed as we were driving out. We go, what the heck was that? So we said, okay, well, we're going to bike in this direction and then go see the slap, hike up to the slap, and then bike back home. Probably about a 25-mile bike ride. Not too bad. Again, little huts. It's almost like your own paved path. This is the town where we were. Our campground is just over behind those buildings there. But if they didn't have a bridge there, they built one. Now those 2 pine trees there are sort of interesting. As I came across, I noticed something in the brush down here, an old pillbox meant for defenses. This would be the port where the weapon would be protruding. So if you came along the road, but they kept all of the old train trestles, and they were refurbishing quite a few of them when we were there. This was another one, and I'm going to show you some of their joinery. They were incredible woodworkers there. Everything had to be just perfect and intricate. They didn't just slap 2 pieces together or butt them up. They made sure that joint was not going to come apart. A lot of families. So it was kind of a weekend here where it was kind of a little more crowded. Ljubljana. This house is cats black on the Poznjagovan Bridge. So it's black cats on the bridge. And oddly enough, I noticed this little box down here with a hole in it. And sure enough, there's one of the little devils. Cats are really adored down here. Another little signature cut. Varata, that's what I mentioned that earlier. That's a place that is popular to go to. We are going to the Slap Pergnik, Krasnogona that way, and they actually had an alpine museum there as well that we stopped into for a moment. Most of the rivers that come into towns anymore have been channeled. I've seen a number of plaques where towns had been flooded in the past, really disastrous floods, and so they channeled them. This is their flag, the national flag, and it's basically the Triglav mountain. I have a better picture of it later, I'll show you. A lot of this sort of stenciling, very intricate, decorative. Beautiful, beautiful bike ride. There's our sign. There's actually two falls, but this was the most, the 175-foot one, and you actually can go behind the falls, so you'll see in a moment. Had a little hike up there first, and I did cover my glasses because I was getting so fogged over. But once I kind of got in, beautiful rainbow, ever present. There's Lynn under the falls, right there, keeping cool. Watch for the little white hat. There she is. She ventured in first. Our still shot of the rainbow. Where's that? Once you get to the other side, it's beautiful, like diamond bricks. Look at people scurrying about underneath here. You know, we hung out here for quite a while before we headed down. Oops, well, that was just her heading down. This was their Alpine Museum. You could get a little coffee here, some refreshment. The thing was most interesting is this was a hut, a vintage hut they brought down to save. It was built in the early 1900s. I think AMC has one up in New York State Museum. I was there once. They had one of an original Appalachian Trail hut there as part of their thing. And this woman here was a groundbreaker involved with this Alpine club that built that hut, that put it up on the mountain piece by piece. Ivica Zavadzda. And these are some drawings of memories of her. They would bike up to the Varata, that lower elevation area there, and then hike up to this little hut. You see them all sleeping together here. Now this is, I'm like, the woman's doing all the cooking. What's going on here? But early 1900s, right? But then this thing of them sliding down, you know, snow screes and glaciers. It was all kind of described in this little book. It was quite interesting. Again, with an individual garden. Another little, it says something about the Pergnik, the falls, how they're kind of making a memorial to this falls, which they've brought water into their town basically, and it was very beautiful. Heading back. You wanted to just pedal slow. Actually, we were having to go uphill. The valley is pretty sloped because actually the water's running down to Ljubljana, and so going slow back was not a problem. Little drinking station pump. And other people with their dogs, their kids. And we walked around the town a little bit more here. A lot of solar panels. They really are big on their window boxes here. So that's the view of the town, and that's the image of Triglav Triglav Mountain, this sort of humpty shouldered peak here with, and in the flag here you can see that's their national symbol, is the peak, the river, and the 3 stars have to do with democracy. I couldn't find out exactly why 3, except I can only think it's the 3 branches of government they're talking about. Back to our little home, away from home. I just wanted to show you some of our little cooking. We have a little stove we take. We buy some pots and pans, but we had brought this with us, and we decided to do some omelets. There was somebody selling eggs along the way, so we stopped and bought some fresh farm eggs. And you know, dinner with $1 million view. That's all I can say. Soka Trail. So this last one here is kind of my waterfall series. We had to come over the mountain pass again. I'd shown you earlier where the cannon structure was, down this trail, and we parked. There weren't as many villages here. They're very, very tiny. This is all your switchbacks. There was probably a dozen of these hairpin turns. At the bottom is their national little botanical garden. It's a very sweet little place, and we got to see, this is an endangered, very, very rare tufted horned rampant. Never saw it before. And they had several of them actually growing there. They wouldn't tell us where you could find them out in nature because you don't want people absconding with them. A cute little park, stairways, stones. But one of the most interesting things, and this again has to do with wars and memorials, this young girl, she was 4 when the Herzegovinian Bosnian War occurred, and she was born in Slovenia, which only lasted about 10 days in Slovenia. And she was 4 at the time, and she remembers a family moved in with them. They were fleeing all the fighting in the war, and they happened to have a little 4-year-old girl with her. And she just remembers it was the most wonderful time in her life. Here's a war breaking out, millions of people being killed, and that's her memory. It's like she says, I know about the war, but when I was a child, this was wonderful for me. I had a playmate every day. We went to school together. We ate together. So it was, she was a really interesting person, very smart at college. She asked us if we had come over to see Ivanka's hometown. And she said, why did you come over? Did you come to Ivanka's hometown? This was right next door. I just had to go into this little chapel because it had this amazing symmetrical angel mural on the ceiling there. That was very unique, not unlike anything I'd seen before. Now we have to drive through an avalanche tunnels, quite a few of them in Europe. And parking right at a campground. Again, some of the campgrounds, you don't have to bring your own place. You can rent places like this. They have little trailers. Some of them have cabins. And this is the Soka River. And it's very sculpted blue waters. It passes through another little campground. They actually have a little outdoor pavilion here and a fire pit. It looked like a fun place. There were guitars hanging around, and some of these views were hard to get to. You really had to like get right on the edge and sort of hang over to see the water. Interesting group of butterflies. Here at another campground, it was quite deep there. I touched that water, it's glacial water. You know, so, and they're jumping in it like, oh yeah, this is fun. No, thanks. I'd scream once and then this particular section was interesting. There were all these streams coming in from the side. It was almost tropical. I mean, it was like something you would see on a Hawaiian island or something. This was sort of the apex. We turned around at this point because now the river sort of flattens out, although it's quite wild still at this point. And I'm sort of looking back now at those falls you saw. Power of that water. But the falls didn't end there. On our drive home, we were driving up another back road, a scenic back road, and had to just stop on this bridge because here was just this amazing, another 170-foot waterfall down below us. Very beautiful. Crossing into Italy, the old port, when you used to have a passport. Italian lake. It was easier for us to go this back way rather than going all the way up a whole set of switchbacks and then all the way down a whole set of switchbacks. We actually went all the way around in an arc, but we had like 2 switchbacks the whole time. Yeah, and our mountains always change it. So this is our next morning. And again, getting to know your campers here. These 2 young ladies own this van. They had it custom decorated. They're from Germany, which is here. So then they said they drove down through Switzerland and then down to the Mediterranean where they're camping on the beach with palm trees. They're quite nice and friendly. And I'd love to have one of those. You really don't want a big vehicle over there. It's too hard to get around. A light breakfast, cherries, pastries, chocolate. What more can you want? A little bit of coffee. And then we're going to go to these 2 slaps, Spodinja Martagova and Zorgje Martagonia. This meaning upper and this means lower. So we were going to hike right out of our campground. And it's probably about, I think it was close to 1,800 foot. Starts out through a little gorge canyon. I had to take this because it reminded me of Sunfish Pond up there where you're always got these little hoodoos going on. I'm sure they get wiped out occasionally when the water rises. There's another family group here. Up and over, there's a set of stairs here. We have to go up another level. And then we'll see the first slap. There it is. It's really quite nice triple falls, which we revisit on the way back down. I'll show you. That was our lunch spot. So up, over the river and through the woods to the next slap we shall go. Quite a few handholds. They're really good on all the handholds are pretty new. Brand new cable, stainless steel. We're getting close there. So Lynn's kind of waiting, saying, you might want to take a look at this and decide what to do. So this is cabled, so we have to actually go down, and right down here, this little gray thing, that's a little bridge we have to get down to and cross over. And the falls is actually back up in behind all of these trees, which was also a surprise. So she's down there now going, okay, I made it, and your turn. But just beautiful sculpted rocks. This was not as big of a water flow as the other one, but just as beautiful. A little bit more of a rock scramble. And we ran into this other family here, a father and son and wife. Just some nice shots. But at this point, this is about as far as you can go without this. So now I'm looking at like a 3% grade vertical climb up through this rock with this cable. I said, Lynn, you want to go? She goes, no, thanks. I'm staying down here. So I'm heading up. So back to the top. I'm going to turn the sound down. So that view right there, our campground is here. I think Lynn is sitting down here somewhere watching me. No, she didn't want to watch me. She's like, she does not like heights at all. And she can't even watch me go. There she is, the little purple shirt. But just the way the rock was all, I had to get up there to see it, and catch the flowing action. Being a photographer, it's like one of those things I just got to do. Last view of the falls before we say goodbye. Time to go home. They had stuck pins in there rather than like ladder holders. It was sort of like step on the rocks, hold the pins. It was a different type of climbing I'd seen. I'm not afraid of this ladder. Oh, and the kissing rock tree. I loved it. It was like buddies. Cross-species interaction there. Quite often they have these little restaurants up in the woods. This one was not open that day because a weekday it's not as busy. That you could hike to, little private places that just wonderful panoramic view. Now we're coming back down to the first slab. Lunch with $1 million view again. Put this one in. This one caught the whole flow of the creek as it turned. And right at this point here is where it goes into the gorge down below. And so both of those falls come down through this stream here. So I was looking at the topo. Actually, this made me like look for a while, spent some time looking at a topo map. We were right in this little saddle here at some point. We'd come up through this woods across this ridge here, and then I still haven't quite pinpointed it, but that's about. And then the stream flows down here. Almost home. They just love to decorate with flowers. This was just somebody came out and took this old stump, put out a cart. An abandoned little bark wood cabin. And then back on, this is our office. You can see, there's a lot of, 5 years ago when we went, you wouldn't see these larger vans here. They've got a lot more popular, but that's about the extent of it. You just can't get around much if you get too much bigger, the big bus RVs that we see here in the US. Extremely rare there, because you just can't get through the mountain passes. Home Sweet Spik. Those little signs all point to different places like Rome, New York, Tokyo, Portsmouth. And that was our last day there. We had a wonderful moon and alpine glow. So thank you very much for bearing with me with all of those images there that are in your head. I'll turn it back over to Phil.
And Jim, thank you.
What a surprise, right?
Surprise.
Oh, Phil, you don't know how much I love this. We have several other Phil's ones, and they're really nice gourd shapes with a very small hole in the which is nice for a few flowers. And I've been like, I wish I had something with a wide neck on it, because I've been getting these bouquets. That's perfect. I love it. You're getting into a new style here.
Well, I have
Salt
a wood
kiln.
fired kiln.
Oh, I was going
now.
to say salt, but this is wood.
It takes
Uh-huh.
about 24 hours to fire up.
Excellent.
And the last 10, 12 hours, we have to stick wood in it every 5 minutes.
Yes, yes, and really get it up cone 9, 10.
10.
Uh-huh. Great.
So,
Ex-potter,
yeah.
so we kind of have a
Yes.
thing.
So, thank you very
Thank you, here,
much.
everybody. Look, isn't that beautiful? I love that. It's even signed at the bottom.
All of the
You're welcome.
things. I don't know that golden glow at night. or
Yeah, in the evening, they call it
that
alpine
was
glow.
special.
And then with the moon at the end there, we were all like, oh. Every day it was a different type of, I mean, wherever we camped throughout Europe, I mean, when we had a mountain view, it was like different. And you could never, one point, which you all do later in our series in the French Alps, and, oh, no, I'm sorry, that was the Alpi Alpine in Italy. Fog would come in and fill the valley. So I would take the same shot once in the morning, once at night, every day. And it was no two were alike. It was just mind blowing. So, okay, thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Refreshments over there, and we'll see you the third Wednesday of next month.
Make sure to thank our baker.